Welcome back to the show, everybody. It's your host, John Scardina. I am so excited for this episode. I have known Gavin now for a little bit. We met at the Indiana Operations Lights Out exercise, where, as you all know, Jessica and Jeremy invited me to check out what they were doing in Indiana. I was really impressed by a lot of different things, and I was also really mostly impressed. I was incredibly impressed by a local emergency manager out of Clark County, Indiana, the director of emergency management, Gavin. Gavin, since then, has, just for everybody's situational awareness, has been like fully integrated into our stuff. So he went to the dynamic populations course in August. We've been chatting about a bunch of different projects offline since then, trying to help each other out on both sides of the aisle. And it's been really exciting to get to know him and his background and see how he looks at a local emergency management. So without any further ado, Gavin, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. It's an honor as a longtime listener of Disaster Tough. It was great to meet you and your staff down at the Atlanta or not conference. It was a training. Uh, so it was a great opportunity, and I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, when we were really impressed by the way you approach dynamic populations, and again, just for everyone's situational awareness, dynamic populations really is for people who work in venues and sports arenas and amusement parks and deal with the ebb and flow. And Clark County is, interestingly enough, no stranger to that because they have a huge air show that happens, and then just on the other side of the river, they have the Kentucky Derby. And so dealing with population influx for different times of the year and, quote unquote tourists and how to deal with special events, it was great to have you out there at the dynamic populations course to have your own perspective. So with that in mind, uh, local emergency management is really the ground truth of where emergency management is, because every disaster is local. We say that's where you see the real impacts, and you have to be so integrated with your first responder counterparts in order to be effective. And so, with that in mind, can you kind of just give us a kind of an overview of how Clark County does emergency management and your approach to emergency management?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like you said, that it's the first line really of emergency management, and if we're sitting in our office all day, not meeting with our first responders or their agency heads, we're not going to get anything done when we need to get it done. So we get out of the office a lot. We don't sit in the office and just sit there and look at plans and silo ourselves. We work with all of our first responders, and we bring something to the table in the form of a service, so that we get invited to the table when it's time to plan for large events and update our plans.
Yeah, in fact, as you were saying that, reminded me of interviewing Craig Fugate on this podcast and talking about, I believe, his first like real introduction to emergency management was a cow got stuck in a hole, and he was like, and he walked through how a cow falling into a hole was like the perfect emergency management scenario, because you had somebody coordinating, somebody reaching out to. I think they got like obviously like some kind of lift to get the cow out of there. They were talking to responders. They were talking to all these people and the farmer who had their cow, their livelihood impacted by that. And so you're walking through like a microcosm. This is a guy who led FEMA for 8 years, and he said a cow in a hole is the perfect analogy for emergency management. And so it just shows that, like, whether it's a cow in a hole or it's a county flood, or a Hurricane Fiona, for example, that's impacting Puerto Rico at the moment. All that stuff is relatable. And
Absolutely.
so if we're talking about that coordination piece that is required, um, can you give an example of your cow in the hole kind of moments where you've gone out there? I know you do stuff with drones. I know you help out with the fire pretty well, and your other adjacent counties. You actually, I'm aware that you also work with them as well. So, talk to us about some of those experiences that solidified why coordination is so important.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, recently, really within the past 3 months, we had a funeral home that kept some expired bodies too long, and of course, the police department's looking for ideas how to manage this, and they they reached out to us and in hopes that we would coordinate that response to that. So we were able to be the lead coordinating agency, reach out and get different resources that were needed, light towers, freezer trucks, and just really coordinate the resource and the response to that. Not so much the investigative side of it, but just the resource heavy side. Um, another other thing is working with our local counties. We've got a district planning council, and in essence, we're all one big county. We ensure that if somebody gets hit, we're going to help them, and that's kind of where we're looking at actually developing a response plan to lay that out how that's going to work instead of just a phone call in the middle of the night. Come help us.
Real quick, we're going to pause for this week's Disaster Tough endorsements. This show is owned and operated by professional emergency managers at Doberman Emergency Management. We apply disaster tough logic by protecting life, property, and business continuity through planning, mitigation, and training. Check us out at DobermanEMG.com or click on the show notes. Radio comms just got a major breakthrough with the L3 Harris XL Extreme 400P. It's the newest and toughest radio out there. Built by their space and tactical teams, the XL Extreme series can take a beating. 1700 degree blast of heat, repeated 3-meter drops, rain, salt water, you name it. The XL Extreme series by L3 Harris can take it. Visit L3Harris.com to schedule your demo today. Sawyer products offer the best, most technologically advanced solution for protection against the sun, bugs, water, and injuries. Everything from water filtration systems to insect repellents, time-release technologies, really amazing stuff. So whether you're at home, work, or at play, make sure you check out Sawyer at Sawyer.com. Okay, let's jump back in. It's funny, the phone call in the middle of the night is like a catch-22 because you want to be the type of person who gets the phone call in the middle of the night, like trusted person. But I thoroughly enjoy sleep. And so I want always to get the call, but I also never want to get the call. And so having a plan like that, I think Zach Borst was on the show talking about how districts like multiple counties don't usually have great plans in place, and it is usually just a phone call. So how do you determine who gets the call? Like, what is part of the planning process requirements that you walk through in terms of, I want to be involved, but I still have to worry about my own county because I'm assuming you don't have a large staff. How do you cover your own needs if you're responding to somebody else?
Yeah, so we've got three full-time paid employees and 7 or 8 volunteers that are really full-time. They're always
Oh,
around,
that's awesome.
and they're great people to have. A lot of them are in the fire side, EMS, dispatchers, so they're always involved in normal processes. But when it's time for us to go out and help another county, they're right there with us. One thing that we do is we've developed a resource or a capabilities list that we are able to share with other counties and let them know what we've got, and then we'll send out we use I Am Responding. We'll send an I Am Responding chat and gather some responses from those folks with us, and then we'll send those resources to the other county to help them.
All right, so I typically don't have a huge learning curve on here, but I have no idea with I Am Responding. What is I Am Responding? Is that like
it's a notification system. So we've got different state criteria that we've inputted into the system. Our computer-aided dispatch at the 911 center will push out those alerts to us, so maintains our situational awareness. So.
Got it. So I have some learning to do after this, and I'll learn more about that. So walking through that though, some of the problems I've seen in the past of like putting together that list is that like we put together the list and then we everyone says like develop a plan, but you don't use the plan, and then a disaster, you call your friends anyways. How do you build up that relationship, that trust, to that? Like, what have you done to help out the other counties, or they've helped out you, so that I know you've gone to Operation Lights Out, for example. Like, what are some of the other events that have built that team cohesion that other people can do around the country, especially those who are like, man, I don't have like any contact with anybody else around me, and or maybe trying to pull teeth to get that done? What are some some positive outcomes for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're fortunate we have a quarterly meeting, so we're able to meet up with everybody. But if we just waited for that quarterly meeting to build relationships, we would never build the relationships.
Hmm.
We reach out, we ask, we offer support. Uh, I made up with this, so I'm always like, what can we help you with? Any large event that you have going on in your county, can we come be a part of the incident management team? Can we come be a part of the boots on the ground doing drone detection or anything like that, just to integrate more into their system so we know what they're looking for when we come in. So it's just reaching out and offering a service to your other county where they would like to conduct something there that we may not they may not be able to without outside support.
So you brought up drones. I kind of teased that out a little bit. We had Chief Eric Funkhauser on the show maybe 3 months ago, and Indiana is starting to be put on the map a little bit for drones because you guys are using drones in EMA and you're using drones with, fire, and you're using drones for even police. I think Chief Funkhauser talked about going out there and helping search for somebody at night and walking out there without incident out of a cornfield. I think that's what it was. And so you're coming up with innovative solutions. Out of all the places in the world, Indiana doing drones is like it feels kind of random to me because it's like not the Gulf where we have massive hurricanes. It's not California where we have the huge wildfires. Indiana, but Indiana is leading in a lot of different ways in that, and it's truly impressive. Um, Especially because the national attention is not usually there. So without the national attention, what are your like top hazards that you're constantly aware of that you're dealing with? I know you have the air show. That's a positive thing, but it's something to be aware of. What are some other things that you have to walk through and think about as Indiana specific?
I mean, I think it first on the list is severe weather, tornadoes. That's
Hmm. Yeah.
what we're our main threat, I would say. Um, you know, Flooding. We have a river. That's probably the next one on the list. And then it's probably a transportation incident specifically for our county, and I'd probably say the whole state, just because I mean Indiana, crossroads of the Midwest. So,
Right.
um,
I
so there's a
70
lot of
and yeah.
yeah, there's a lot of interstate traffic, and then I think more locally, ours would be the soft targets, special events, things of large crowds,
Mm.
no real restrictions. So that's another thread up there that we watch.
That you think about. Yeah, I would. Um, I I admittedly have a lot of experience in the Fed side, and um, because of interviews like this and working with different counterparts. I mean, as a Fed, I worked with counties, but I've never, I've never been a county EM, and uh, I always have hats off to that because when I was in like DC, um, there was a massive snowstorm. It was like Snowmageddon is what they were calling it, and I went out with my wife. We had no power for like 5 days, but like the first day it was snowing, we went outside and made like snowmen and we're just like playing in the snow, right? Just my wife and I. We didn't have kids or anything, but thankfully we had neighbors with little kids, and so we didn't look super weird playing out, like just like acting like little kids. But it was a great time, and got home and I got about 40 texts from all my friends in the local area saying like they were EOCs were activated and they were so it was like that was like my first real introduction. This was maybe 10 years ago now. It's like recognizing like man, local EMs really do spawn to like everything. And that has to be exhausting. And then you switch over to the COVID life where it's like now all the other emergency managers are learning about uh constant responses. How do you manage, even emotionally, dealing with? I mean, we all have a service-minded heart, right? But going out to like virtually every single event in your local area, and recognizing you have staff, how do you deal with that personally? Do you have thresholds? Do you have hot washes? Like, what do you deal with, or how do you deal with it rather
I,
when
I,
things happen?
I mean, especially we've got a critical incident of some sort. We've got a critical incident management team that's hosted here regionally, and they're a great resource to tap into. But just locally within our office, it's an open door policy. We talk about everything, anything, and if there's somebody having a problem, we're gonna sit around and we're gonna talk about it, and it's just like a group of guys and gals sitting around and just discussing, like like me and you are here. I mean, it's pretty
Yeah.
nonchalant, informal, and just and if somebody after that doesn't get what they need, or then we're gonna look and we're gonna reach out and other professionals and help them.
Yeah, I think that's okay to say, right? Like sometimes other professionals are required. St. Louis had a massive flooding event. What a month and a half ago, worst flooding event in 178 years. Essentially, it boils down to like a flash flooding event, but still catastrophic.
Right.
And being in the St. Louis area, I was seriously hoping that the hot washes would include like barbecue. That's like my go-to of like getting overcoming problems. But whatever, to each their own. So when you're talking about sitting around, I just had the image of what was that movie? The Avengers. Afterward, they're all just sitting in the shawarma, I think is what they were eating. They were sitting in the cafe. So
Yeah.
I think, yeah, food, sitting around, chatting. One of the things that, I'm a big fan of talking it out. And obviously, I have a podcast, so I'm a talker. But some things I don't want to talk about, and it's so much easier to not have to talk about it because the other person in the room has been there. I have a friend like that. His name is Patrick McGinn. He's been on the podcast a few times. At every disaster that he responds to or that I respond to, we get on the phone, we chat, we hang out, and there's a lot that we don't talk about, and that's kind of nice too. But
Right.
just knowing that your buddy's there to support. So um, yeah, there's always a call out, especially for National Preparedness Month, and we're talking about readiness. One of the things to be ready for is to recognize that disasters are unique and they're strange, and especially when you're up close and personal. Like I said, I was always on the Fed side, but I've worked with local counterparts, and when you see things up close and personal, uh, I think it's okay to say, like, what I call it, mental first aid is part of the recovery process, even for a responder.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, um, in terms of that regard, you also have a first responder background, right? You were a firefighter before you became an emergency manager? Is that right?
Yeah, I worked for a township fire department. We ran EMS and
Mm.
uh, fire department, fire apparatus, and we so I started out there, and they have a great job, and all of our guys here do it. I've got a couple firemen on our group of people here. They've all said they're going to listen to it and burn it on CDs and share it with everyone. So,
That's
uh,
awesome.
but no,
But
it
that
it
coordination piece is different, right? I mean,
right.
it is the mental game is definitely different on one versus the other for sure.
Yeah, yeah,
So, you got into this field though. So at Operation Lights Out, you're telling me. So you became the emergency manager at what, 24, was it?
at 24. So
24. I was
yeah.
so impressed when I heard that. I was thinking 24, what was I doing? And I'm too embarrassed to say it on the podcast, but it shows that you're motivated. And um again, going back to the firefighter thing, uh I wouldn't want to do. I'm not a firefighter, and luckily, I have known a lot of men like you, men and women who are firefighters, who were and who are, and been integrated with USAR. And I'm sure, as you agree, like the utmost respect for what they have to do, and yet I think emergency managers can help them out a lot.
Absolutely.
And there's a lot that we can take off their plate so that they can do their job more effectively. And I wonder if the field doesn't really recognize that, which is really funny because a lot of emergency managers come from fire and EMS backgrounds, and then they step away, and excuse me, and that's been an issue, right? So
Right.
how do we how do we bridge that gap? I mean, you're bridging that gap right now. You were 24. You're several years into the job. You're still working with firefighters. Why do you think that emergency managers, especially with that fire, EMS, first responder background, don't integrate well with their former colleagues? And how do we start bridging that gap now in the field?
Yeah, I mean that's a pretty complex issue, but I think one thing that I've recognized here is that we as emergency managers don't really know our role, and we don't like to stay in our lane. So one thing I quickly did was I'm no longer a firefighter or EMT, so I'm not. That's not my issue. I'm there to support the fire and EMS and police departments. So uh, learning and adapting to that change of responsibility is probably the hardest part of it. One thing that helped us was COVID, or helped me was COVID. It really pushed us away from that tactical level to the real high level of the response. But I mean, I think that a lot of people they still want to be tactical, hands on, and that's not us anymore. I mean, we still have ways to be tactical and hands on with damage assessments, drone response, and we could be really good at those tactical level operations. But we still like to get stuck on firefighting, medical care, and instead of supporting those at a larger level.
Mm. The it is a complex issue, right? I mean, and the tactical stuff is the cool stuff.
You're
I've
right.
had several emergency managers on here talking about how emergency managers, by trade, have to be okay not getting the credit for it. And I still think that we can give, as emergency managers, we can give credit to other emergency managers, and that's one way we can kind of boost the morale. But ultimately, like here's an easy example. When my undergrad, I wanted to get an internship, and obviously young, was inexperienced, didn't know a lot. But I thought, hey, Red Cross, I always see them in disasters. They always have these cool videos out. I thought I would be like mucking out homes. I thought I'd be like in response. And I went there and I said, hey, like an internship. And he says, yeah, sure. And like for the next 4 months, I was doing paperwork and I was learning a whole lot. And I kept on having like this like feeling of like, man, like I thought I thought we were the humanitarian responders, right? That
Right.
that side of the house. But the more I learned and appreciated, um, when fire would call for a firehouse, like a house was on fire, we would get called out, and our job was to take care of the people once that was all taken care of. So the hotels, the feeding mission, all that stuff. And I learned to love the job because I got to help out people, and that's how I was quote unquote tactical. But
Right.
it is a mindset. It must be even more difficult from having that tactical background, and quote unquote that adrenaline rush to something a little more, you know, it's adrenaline, but in a very different way, right?
Right.
Um, gosh, you could talk
No.
about that for probably forever.
Oh. Yeah.
Um, yep. That
Yeah. I mean,
was
I
most
can sit here and
Indiana
talk.
response.
Oh.
Yep.
Oh. Oh.
Oh.
Yeah.
Um.
No,
Oh.
I could sit here. I could sit here and talk about it all day long. I mean, the first love was tactics and hands-on. So, but now I have a weird obsession now to try to find ways to support them with their hands-on. Grants, different plans, different instant management software, trying to make their lives easier. That's really all I set out every day is like I think of something. How can I make the fire guys, police guys, EMS guys? How can I make their lives better when they're responding to something?
So, you said it was a weird obsession. I'm gonna update that to saying you want to become uh, remain a professional. Like, and what I really mean that in the greatest sense, because there's people who are in the profession who are not professional, and that requires so much time and effort and passion and motivation and gosh, especially with emergency management, writing grants and everything that's required, all the stuff that requires you just to be all in all the time in order to help out somebody else. And it is some of the most difficult aspects of the job, and yet some of the most rewarding when you get to that level and you're able to integrate with everybody that you're connecting with, and it translates to other things too, like USAR, right? I have an amazing sponsor, L3 Harris. They do radios for us. When I went and worked with our USAR teams, I called them up and said, they don't have radios. Can you donate some radios? And they said yes. And that was like the most emergency management moment of my life because I wanted to help out somebody else. And I couldn't personally do it, but I knew of another resource that could, that I was connected to. And, fast forward 4 or 5 times now, they get radios donated to them every training that they do. It's a good PR thing for L3
Yeah,
Harris, sure. But L3 Harris didn't know about them, and they didn't know about L3 Harris, and so, um, it translated even to into my job now, even
right.
though it's kind of outside the scope. So having that service-minded mentality is huge. Um, so let's
Yeah.
talk about next steps then, because we have a few minutes left here. What's on the horizon for you? What do you focus on? How do you remain a professional? Like, what are you doing to push to the next level
Going to
besides
continue
taking dive pop classes?
the Dive Pop 2022, real deal. No.
Hashtag the real deal.
That's,
Yeah.
no, it's going to classes like that to get you out of your comfort zone. I walked into the dive pop class and there sits Pete Gaynor, which was super intimidating. Then John puts me in the same group as him,
Mm.
and so spend the whole week with Pete, and you kind of get out of your comfort zone. And when you start saying things and he's not correcting you, I guess you feel kind of good about yourself. And uh, so no, I mean it's for real. You got to keep going to these classes, and if you learned something 3 years ago, there's a great chance that it's not the same anymore, and you need to go back through it. Um,
Good
and
point.
you've got to just keep continuing education, professional development. Right now, I just feel that us as emergency managers, we want to be taken seriously, and but we don't have any professional requirements to continue going through classes. Uh, One thing that I would like to see change is the EMPG grant. We're required to take, I think, 4 independent study classes a year, and that's it. I mean, I could take those in 30 minutes, but we've
Mm.
got to we've got to do better, and we've got to grow the field and bring more professional development requirements to the field.
I'm acutely aware that I'm acutely aware of all options for training, and I'm acutely aware that there's no standardization option in our field. There are several um, social clubs, and there are several nice to haves, and there's several cool things, but there's truly no standardization in the field. And it comes from having a million different definitions, which we can clean up, which I've been trying to clean up. Emergency management is the strategic coordination of emergency services, right? We've been trying to attack this on the podcast. You mentioned Pete Gaynor. Pete Gaynor has brought it up. Brock Long brought it up. Craig Fugate brought it up. Heads of FEMA on this podcast, all recognizing the lack of standardization. And so you're in good company, Gavin. If you say that, yourself. But we've also had other perspectives. Okay, you're a county emergency manager. You mentioned it. We've had hospital emergency managers on here. We've had private sector, public sector. We've had people from NATO. We've had the DoD. We've had kind of everybody across the board, and we'll keep identifying great leaders to bring on the podcast. And almost all of them have brought it up in one way or the other that we need to hit the next phase in our field. I argue that the emergency management response for dynamic populations course and the emergency response technologies course and the EOC course that we're developing at the Readiness Lab, these courses are next level. So the first time we're really getting to like next level training, but that's only a precursor of something greater to come. And what's greater to come is standardization. And that's really what we're working on. That's like the secret sauce, or the secret behind the door thing that we're trying to work on is we have to attack this problem of when you call an emergency manager, you don't know what you're getting. You
Right.
don't know if you're getting somebody great like Gavin or you're getting somebody terrible like John, right? And so, how do you deal with that, and how do you address it? And that's obviously rhetorical for the field, but we need to create metrics of everybody across the board, not just independent study, but everybody should be required to take a DIPOP class. For
Right.
example, I would love that. Um, but there should be a generalist. A basic foundation of all emergency managers should have a baseline foundation of understanding. And I'm saying that more than ICS 100 through 800, a little bit more work to create a true foundation.
Right.
And then there should be specializations from there. And case in point, Zach Borst again brought him up a couple times. He talked about having an intelligence analyst and an EOC. My argument is that GISers, people who do GIS, can be the analysts, and his immediate response was, "But John, GISers are not trained in intelligence for emergency management," and he was 100% correct.
Right.
The only reason why I, stood out more or less is that I had done emergency management for, several years before that, and then got into GIS, and so I knew what ops wanted, I knew what planning wanted, and we were able to do some, future stuff, predictive analysis. But
Right.
we can do better as a field. So, gosh,
Yeah, absolutely.
I could talk about that for again forever. But
Oh,
great
I
call
could
out.
too.
Yeah. So, next step for the field is standardization through the Readiness Lab, and great call out there. Clark County, you want to make one last pitch for Clark County, what you guys are doing there. If you want to shout out to some of your firefighter buddies, here's your opportunity.
Yeah, we've got a great group of people here. Our deputy director, Brian Jones, logistics coordinator Andrew Conlon. They're great people. They're part of the real deal of our county, and they help us build relationships and they keep us going. And so without them, we couldn't keep supporting all of our first responder agencies and our other non-traditional response agencies. So it's a great group of people here. We've got a great group of elected officials that support us in our mission, let us get grants, and keep spending the money that the federal government gives us. So we're very fortunate for that. So um, that's all I really have. But that's great.
Oh.
It's great.
Yep. That
great,
was it.
great.
Yep.
Yeah, that's all I have. But no, it's a great
the
group.
OPE of emergency management. No. Gavin, thanks again so much for coming on. It's really impressive to see what you've done and where you're headed. That your mindset. You're what was it before? You're weirdly passionate, or you're weirdly involved. I'm weirdly involved too, and it's because I have seen it up close and personal. I know you have as well, and we're focusing on the right stuff. We hope to see you at future trainings. We hope to have you on the podcast again, and Clark County is doing it right. I was very impressed by everything I've seen and been learning about from your end. So kudos to your leadership.
Appreciate that.
And yeah, thanks again for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So the field, we talked about a lot of different things about here. We talked about local emergency management. We talked about Clark County. We talked about Indiana. We talked about the OPEs. We talked about the YEPs, all kinds of stuff. If you're doing something in emergency management where you're seeing it, especially at the local level, we would love to know about what you're doing, whether it's creating district plans or it's identifying hazards or it's walking through and working with your counterparts. What are some of the good, the bad, and the ugly that you're trying to work through that we can help out as a field? If you want to let us know, put it in the comments on social media. We get lots of emails. That's great. But we'd love to see it on social media for Disaster Tough Podcast. If you got something out of the show, which you should have, I definitely did. I learned about a whole nother communication platform, for example. So that was excellent. So please give us that 5-star rating and subscribe, and we'll see you for the next one.